I'd like to thank Ramon Marilon and the Mounts Vapor program for bringing me here. It's delightful to be able to present some of my thoughts on the internet and democracy here with you, because for me this is a very, very early kind of project in a much longer endeavor that is motivated by the sense that the new digital technologies hold a huge amount of promise for deepening democratic engagement. I'm new to that, sort of searched around the world for most of my career for interesting democratic innovations. For the most part, I've not looked at digital technologies, and so I'm very much on the early part of the learning curve and coming up to speed on that, so I welcome the conversation that will ensue this afternoon. So, just to begin, this is a set of remarks that comes in fours. I'll talk about 4 views about the internet and politics. I'll talk about 4 cases of viral engagement. And then I'll talk about 4 norms of democracy or democratic performance, and whether or not the 4 cases of viral engagement more broadly enhances those democratic norms or undermines them. So just very briefly, how many people here feel like they have a sense of the debate about internet and politics? Just so I can get a sense of the room. Just a few people. Okay, so I'm just kind of sketching out here in very, very broad strokes some of the positions that are out there in the literature. I think many political scientists are drawn to the view, when looking at technology and politics, really that there's nothing new under the sun. That technology, that digital technology is a medium, but very superstructural or epiphenomenal compared to the deep motors of politics. And so we don't really need to pay so much attention there. Just as an example, in a recent book, The Unheavenly Course, Sid Verba, Kay Schlossman, and Henry Brady looked at internet politics, and especially Facebook, political activity on Facebook, and they concluded that it wasn't that much different from political activity offline, not on Facebook, in the very specific sense that inequalities hold on Facebook as well as off Facebook, that people of higher socioeconomic status participate on Facebook in politics much more than people of low socioeconomic status, just like they do in politics more generally. People coming at the field of technology and politics from the perspective of technologists tend to be much, much more optimistic, even utopian, about the possibilities of the internet for deepening democracy. And so, there's a long list of writers here. One of them, one of my favorites, because he's very provocative and he writes very well and clearly, is Clay Shirky, a book that you all should read if you're interested in this domain, called Here Comes Everybody. And the idea of that book is that that what the internet does is make large organizations no longer relevant, because the costs of collective communication and even collective action fall to 0 with the internet, so he argues. And if that were true, that would be a pretty revolutionary change for how we think about and do politics. I think it's not true. I won't spend much time critiquing these views. I just kind of want to sketch them out here so you have a sense of the terrain. Another very provocative thinker is Evgeny Morozov. You can read him, his new book, or read him on the pages of the New York Times. He's got a New York Times column lately on technology. He is on the opposite end of people like Clay Shirky, in that he thinks that the digital technologies usher in an era of authoritarian control. And he thinks that this is true not just for the authoritarian countries, but also for more democratic countries as well. That for him, the affordances of digital technologies will primarily be exploited for Foucauldian control ends. My own view is much more in this 4th family, which I kind of call relational evolution. And the idea is that what technologies, the digital technologies, do is transform the ways that organizations interact with their constituents and members. And they transform the ways that political parties interact with their potential supporters, in which governments interact with citizens, and in which advocacy groups interact with their constituents, and in which they mobilize people. A couple of really excellent young scholars writing on this are David Karpf and Daniel Kreis. David Karpf has written this excellent book called The Move On Effect, looking at advocacy organizations in the model of the American organization Move On. And Daniel Kreis has followed the use of technologies by the Democratic Party since the Howard Dean campaign in the United States very, very closely from a kind of sociological, political sociological perspective. And they have a view that is about the textured relationships between organizations and their members, and their view is certainly nothing new under the sun, but is one of incremental change and experimentation. So those are 4 views out there. Now, I was struck in 2011 and 2012 by 4 very prominent cases of internet politics that unfolded primarily in the United States, but many of them had viewers and participants worldwide. And I don't know, I haven't kind of looked back in the last decade or last 5 to 10 years. I don't know if my focus on these 4 cases is just a matter of my own recall bias, that they happened to occur when I was thinking about the internet, or whether indeed they are new in the sense that a confluence of factors such as the affordances of social media, the proliferation of use of social media, the increased capacity of organizations to be technologically savvy and exploit the new technologies has come to a head in 2012, or whether these cases like them have been unfolding all along, just in a way that escaped my attention. These are cases that I call viral engagement because they engage millions of people very, very quickly over a period of days, sometimes weeks, but often days, and often to significant political effect. The first case of viral engagement that I want to talk about is Kony 2012. How many people have seen the Kony 2012 video? So, maybe a quarter. So, just briefly, just to give you an overview of the case, on March 5th, 2012, a group called Invisible Children, located in California, released a 30-minute short film that documented the atrocities led by Ugandan warlord Joseph Kony. The video, called Kony 2012, hit 100 million views in a matter of 6 days. It was the fastest video ever to achieve that level of viral diffusion. The second, up until then, the second fastest viral spread video was Lady Gaga's Bad Romance. And Bad Romance took 18 days to reach 100 million views. Justin Bieber's Baby hit 100 million views in 56 days. I'll talk a little bit more about who these viewers were, but this is the case of the 4 cases that is most ambiguous in terms of its policy effect. The announced purpose of the video was to bring this person, Joseph Kony, to justice through presumably some international court of human rights. Did it do that? No, it didn't do that. However, the AFRICOM commander of U.S. Special Forces in Africa, I think General Ham is his name, testifies that the existence of the video created a continued source of funding for himself and his soldiers throughout time so they could pursue this mission. Okay, the second case of viral engagement, which is probably less familiar to a European audience, is a case that was precipitated by a large foundation, a large charitable foundation in the United States called the Susan G. Komen Foundation for the Cure. And this is a foundation that sponsors lots of activities to raise money, like charitable walks that millions of people participate in. They raise money to do research to find the cure to breast cancer and to provide women's health services. For many, many years, the Susan G. Komen Foundation had provided a stream of funding, not a huge amount of money, but some funding, to an organization called Planned Parenthood, which is a controversial organization in the United States because Planned Parenthood operates many, many clinics that provide all sorts of women's health services, but many of them provide abortion services in the United States, and this makes them very politically controversial. On December 16, 2011, the Susan G. Komen Foundation board, the board of governors for the foundation, decided to defund Planned Parenthood. They said that the Susan G. Komen Foundation is revisiting its charitable support policy, and it will no longer support organizations that are under any sort of investigation. And Planned Parenthood was under a congressional investigation that many people think was politically motivated. On January 31st, 2012, so 6 weeks later, the Associated Press organization broke the story, and Planned Parenthood, in response to the news, the president of Planned Parenthood tweeted on her Twitter account, "Susan G. Komen caves under anti-choice pressure, ends funding for breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood health centers. Visit this page to support a petition against the Susan G. Komen Foundation's decision." Within 3 days, Planned Parenthood received $300 million in donations, which exceeds the amount of money that they lost from the Susan G. Komen Foundation, and 100,000 Facebook likes, and lots of social media attention for their campaign against the Planned Parenthood, or against the Susan G. Komen Foundation decision. On February 3rd, just 3 days later, 3 days after Planned Parenthood initiated its first tweet, the Susan G. Komen Foundation reversed their decision. On February 7th, 8 days later, several Susan G. Komen Foundation board members who favored the defunding decision resigned, and a few weeks after that, the executive director of the Susan G. Komen Foundation resigned. Right, so from the Planned Parenthood's perspective, a fabulously successful social media campaign. The third case of viral engagement that I want to talk about is the case of Trayvon Martin. How many people have heard of Trayvon Martin? So a quarter. So Trayvon Martin's story. Trayvon Martin was a young African-American man who lived in Florida. On February 26, 2012, George Zimmerman, who was a neighborhood watch volunteer in this Florida town, shot and killed Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old boy in the town of Sanford, Florida. Trayvon Martin was walking home from a convenience store where he purchased a package of Skittles candy and an iced tea. Zimmerman, after shooting Trayvon Martin, was taken into custody and told police that he had shot Martin in self-defense after a fight. The police filed no charges and let George Zimmerman go. No arrest. On March 8th, Trayvon Martin's parents created, so March 8th is about 2 weeks after this incident happened. On March 8th, Trayvon Martin's parents created a petition on a website called change.org calling for George Zimmerman's arrest. As of this writing, the petition is no longer active, but after, I think, probably 2 or 3 months, the petition had received 2.2 million people, 2.2 million signatures for that petition. On March 23rd, President Obama said in a speech, "If I had a son, he would look like Trayvon Martin." A few days later, Florida Governor Rick Perry appointed a special prosecutor to investigate the case, to open up the case and investigate it. And on April 11th of that year, the special prosecutor arrested George Zimmerman and charged him with second-degree murder. So it reversed this administrative decision of the police. The final case of viral engagement that I'd like to talk about is a campaign called Stop Pipisopa. And this campaign deals with legislation, congressional legislation, called the Stop Online Piracy Act and the Protect Internet Property Act, or Information Property Act. This story begins the prior year in 2011. On May 12th, 2011, Democratic Senator Patrick Leahy sponsored the Protect Intellectual Property Act with 11 bipartisan co-sponsors in the U.S. Senate. A little bit later, on October 2011, Lamar Smith introduced a very similar parallel piece of legislation called the Stop Online Piracy Act in the U.S. House. These pieces of legislation were broadly perceived to protect the interests of the recording industry and the motion picture industry of America. They're designed to stop people from trafficking in copyrighted material on the internet. Throughout 2011, everyone thought that passage was a foregone conclusion. Both of the, unlike most other legislation that year, these two pieces of legislation in the United States had broad bipartisan support. Everybody, members of the House and the Senate from both parties, for the most part, supported both the SOPA and PIPA. However, things changed over the course of 2012. Beginning in 2012, there was a large bottom-up protest married to several large internet organizations such as Wikipedia and eventually Google that campaigned against the PIPA-SOPA legislation. Google sponsored a petition which 7 million people signed. Wikipedia conducted a strike, an information strike, and the whole Wikipedia site went dark for one day, and it said, this is what the internet will look like if PIPA-SOPA passes, and they had a link to a petition site, and that Wikipedia page got 162 million views. 8 million of those people used the online form. On the day of the blackout, the very day of the blackout, 6 senators who sponsored the legislation reversed their position, and 110 senators and congressmen issued statements in opposition to PIPA-SOPA on that one day after. Shortly thereafter, the legislation was put on hold in the House and the Senate. Okay? So these are 4 instances of eruptions of, I don't want to fill in the word, but quasi-populist, bottom-up, popular engagement around specific issues. Around racial discrimination on the part of the police, around human rights violations, around women's health, and finally around internet freedom that garner huge millions of supporters, each of them, in just a matter of days. And I think that this is an important phenomenon to understand. And for the rest of these remarks, I want to explore 2 dimensions of understanding the phenomenon. The first perspective is to try to create a little bit of a model for how to think about viral engagement, right? What its structure looks like. That'll take a little bit of time. And then I want to spend the majority of my time remaining answering, speculating about the broad question of whether or not viral engagement is good for democracy. Right? So it's big, right? I hope that I've convinced you that at least these 4 cases of viral engagement are big, fast, powerful. And then we want to know, is it good or bad? And in particular, as a democratic theorist, I want to know, is it good or bad for democracy? And I want to provide a way of thinking about that question, if not a decisive or conclusive answer to that question. Now, lots of people think of viral engagement as a pure bottom-up phenomenon, as a kind of information and engagement flowing through a relatively flat social network that is not really populated by organizations or much structure. I want to push against that a little bit and construct a very, very simple model of viral engagement that takes into account 3 different main components. First, an ask. Viral engagement, at least these 4 cases of viral engagement, begin with a political entrepreneur who is asking an audience to engage, first of all, to think about a particular public issue through a particular lens, and then to take action of some kind. And that constitutes an ask. The second element of viral engagement is the virality, is the spread. And then a third layer is the political and institutional structure through which virality unfolds. Okay, so first of all, the ask. The ask has 3 different parts, right? The first part is new information. Kony 2012 introduces information about a warlord, something happening in Uganda and later on the Congo that most of the viewers didn't know about. The second component of the ask is an injustice frame in the Bedford and Snow sense. So the ask always frames information in a particular way, right? Information in Kony 2012 is not presented in a neutral way. It's presented in a particular frame of human rights and injustice. Similarly, the Planned Parenthood tweet was framed in a certain way. The Susan G. Komen Foundation is a political puppet who is acting in ways that hurt women's health, right? So they all have a frame of injustice, and they're asking the viewer to adopt that frame as their own. And finally, there's a request for action. There's always a request that the person who views the video or the tweet do something. At minimum, the request for action has a couple of components. The first component is to tell your friends about it, spread the word. And the second component is to register your support in some way, to like a Facebook page, to sign the Change.org Trayvon Martin petition, whatever it is, to register your support. And then sometimes there are other requests for action on top of that. Okay, so the virality is the second component. Virality is that the ask spreads to millions of people through the social networks and engages lots of other people. So this is a kind of structure of virality here, very simply. Now, there's a mathematical definition of virality that is not my own. A campaign goes viral just in case the average viewer of an ask repeats that message to at least 1.2 other viewers or potential viewers in the social network. If that happens, then the ask goes viral, right? It's a very kind of mathematical sense, right? There's a social network out there, there's an ask, and if the ask catches on with a coefficient of greater than 1.2, then the ask goes viral. So the viral campaign has at least these two elements, right? It has, it has the social entrepreneur, and then making an ask of an audience, and if that ask has a coefficient of a repetition coefficient of greater than 1.2, then the campaign, then the message actually goes viral. But that central activity of the ask and virality is embedded in a larger institutional structure, right? And the larger institutional structure has two intermediating components. There's mainstream media coverage, and there's interest group and organizational action in response to the ask, right? And so all of the four campaigns that I talked about in the first part of my remarks were covered by mainstream media, and part of the effect of that coverage was to amplify the virality of the campaign, because a lot of people heard about it, not through their social networks, but through mainstream media as well. And all of the viral campaigns also had involved interest group and organizational action. And some parts of the interest group and organizational action are interest groups that support the campaign, hop on in favor of it, and others are pushbacks. So for those of you who followed the Kony 2012 campaign, many human rights groups rejected Kony 2012 because they thought that it was portraying human rights violations in Africa in an unhelpful way, that they thought that Joseph Kony was no longer a significant threat, that it distracted a lot of attention, maybe away from their organizations, I don't know. But very few of them, I think, came out and said, wow, you know, Kony 2012 engaged 100 million viewers in human rights issues in Africa who hadn't cared about that issue before. No, most of them, I think it's fair to say, did not have that reaction. They had the opposite reaction, which is, who's invisible children, and who are they to set the agenda around human rights? And that's what we do. We set that agenda, right? And then finally, probably the most important for students of politics is the target response of the government, right? All of these viral campaigns ultimately aim at changing behavior of some organization, sometimes a government organization, in the case of Planned Parenthood, a nonprofit organization, but they're aimed at changing that response, okay? So this is basically how I'm thinking about the very simple structure of viral campaigns. Okay, so now, well, let's just pause for a second. There are at least a couple of ways to reckon whether or not viral campaigns succeed, right? Probably the most straightforward way to reckon whether or not viral campaigns succeed is whether they succeed in changing the actions of the target organization, right? That is kind of reckoning success of viral campaigns in their own terms. That's not the criteria that I'm going to use. I'm going to use a different set of criteria, and I'm going to use democratic criteria and ask whether viral campaigns are likely to succeed in improving the quality of democracy, right? And the intuition, the foil that I want to play off of here is that I think probably a lot of people think that viral campaigns are not likely to enhance the quality of democracy very much, that the right way to think about viral campaigns is as some teched-up 21st century version of an 18th century mob, right? But I'm going to offer some speculative remarks now that push the other way, that say that viral campaigns may enhance the quality of democracy along 4 important criteria. The first criteria is a criteria of political inclusion. The second criteria is a criterion of political equality. The third criterion is the criterion of democratic deliberation. And the fourth and final criterion is the criterion of civic education. Okay? So the first question, does viral engagement expand the circle of people who are engaged in politics from the very low kind of level of knowing about political issues to a slightly higher level of engaging in some discussion about political issues within a social network to a higher level of trying to exercise influence on some set of political issues? Does it expand that circle of inclusion, right? And if the answer is yes, then generally yes, then I think viral campaigns, that's a mark in favor of saying, yes, they are at least good for democracy on that one criteria. Okay. Here are 3 reasons to think that viral campaigns do increase the circle of inclusion. First, the medium is much more accessible for some groups of people, especially young people who are millennials who are much more accustomed to interacting for commerce, for social reasons, through digital media than prior generations. The second reason is that they, at least to some degree, leverage a network that primarily produces social or commercial value. Facebook produces social value for people interacting with friends. Amazon produces commercial value. It leverages social networks to produce some political value, to get some political discussion going. So to this point, the average viewer of the Coney 2012 video was an adolescent girl, right? Not the average target of a human rights campaign or a human rights campaigner. Quite a different group altogether. And why is that? It's because, not the average, the modal viewer. It's because that modal viewer, adolescent girls, are the heaviest demographics for social media use, and so they use this social media, but it had political consequences, right? Okay, and then the third consideration in favor of inclusion is that the ask, as it unfolds in social media and viral campaigns, is much easier to comply with than asks typically asked through face-to-face media. It's certainly easier than voting. It's easier than giving money through your checkbook or through a credit card, right? It's as easy as clicking a like on a Facebook page. So one virtue, people may think that there are many downsides, But one virtue to the ask of a viral campaign is it dramatically lowers the barriers to engagement of some kind. And that is a reason to think that it will increase the circle of inclusion, right? Okay. The second norm is political equality, right? The norm is a simple one. All citizens should be counted equally in public decisions, and they should enjoy equal opportunities to exercise political influence. The question then is, does viral engagement increase the equality of opportunity for political influence? Conditions of political equality are, of course, violated in every advanced democracy. Two especially important challenges to political equality in the United States, but probably in many other societies also. Two particularly important challenges to equal political influence are the force of money in politics and the structural asymmetry of interest. Money in politics is easy enough to understand. The structural asymmetry of interest is, read Pepper's recent book on business politics, on the quiet politics, is that a lot of policy issues, maybe many policy issues, are structured in such a way that they're a concentrated set of interests who can dominate a policy apparatus at the expense of a much larger group of interested parties, potential beneficiaries. Sometimes, and we saw that in several of the cases highlighted earlier, viral engagement triggers a kind of countervailing power. In at least 2, maybe 4 of the cases above, viral campaigns made possible by social media aggregate the diffuse interests of millions of people into a powerful and articulate and visible set of political demands, right? Now, the most clear case of viral engagement as a case of countervailing power is the Pipisopa campaign, right? There was a classic case of structural asymmetry of interest and the problem of money in politics, by the way, right? Made it so that the passage of PIPA and SOPA was largely a foregone conclusion by people watching politics as usual inside the Beltway. And then you roll the tape forward 6 months, and boom, there's an explosion of protest activity online that constitutes a big countervailing power that stops, at least for the time being, the PIPA-SOPA legislation in its tracks. So that's the most clear illustration of viral engagement creating more equal political opportunity. Right? Another case, and I think you can also read the Trayvon Martin case as enhancing political equality. There, the frustration of political equality, what frustrates political equality is a criminal justice system that is captured by a set of perspectives that is very hostile to the interests of young black Americans and young African American men. And one instance of that hostility was the release of George Zimmerman without arrest, and then the Change.org petition for Trayvon Martin opens up a floodgate which enables 2 million people with a very diffuse interest in correcting the racial injustice of the American criminal justice system to come in and articulate that demand in a very, very clear way, right? Now, I'll talk a little bit later about future trends, but just to note here, we may be very lucky, democratically speaking, in 2012, that the situation of viral engagement producing a source, offering a source of countervailing power may be limited to this particular frame in time if it's possible for monetary investments that generate viral engagement, right? Because if one key to generating successful, if more investments and more polished asks and more diffused asks that are well-resourced, that are well-purchased, that are well-targeted through big data, etc., manage to generate viral engagement, then this window of time in which viral engagement acts on the side of political equality and political opportunity will be very limited because because in the future, if this is true, viral engagement will become an instrument that is that advantages, like many other political instruments, those with more resources. Right now, that's not the case, and maybe in the future. We don't know, of course, what the future holds. Now, a third democratic value is public deliberation. This may be the hardest case to make for viral engagement, right? So the value of public deliberation, in a sentence, collective decisions and actions should be based upon a broad public consideration of contending reasons, arguments, and evidence that appeal to everyone who is affected by those collective decisions and actions. That is an ideal of public deliberation. Now, you might think that viral engagement is very, very bad for public deliberation, right? Certainly the human rights organizations who complained about Pony 2012 thought that. I think probably the Susan G. Komen Foundation thought that as it was being attacked by the Planned Parenthood campaign, right? Because viral engagement is an internet ask that catches on very, very broadly. And that is one set of reasons and one frame, not an exchange. And so how could it be that viral engagement contributes to public deliberation? So I think that there are several reasons to think that, that at least these viral engagements and perhaps others do contribute to public deliberation in democratic settings. First of all, the ask that catches on is oftentimes an ask that is responding to a prior public debate which is defective because it ignores this issue. And one reason that it catches on, one reason that these asks go viral, is that they tap a chord in audiences who notice that there's this important value claim that is not being addressed in the public debate, right? And so this first bullet point here, the ask taken in response to defective public debate, asks you to picture the viral campaign as occurring in a stream of public conversation, a lot of which has occurred before the viral campaign kicks in, right? There's a whole conversation about Pipisopa that occurs before the Pipisopa viral campaign. It's just that that public conversation is defective because it's not very public, because it's captured by a set of concentrated interests who are able to hire fabulously influential and well-paid lobbyists, right? And what the ask does is break open that sealed conversation. And that way, it's a contribution to public deliberation, right? The second point is that information and argument in viral engagement is only one perspective. It's not hegemonic. In none of the cases above was the viral campaign and the frame of the viral campaign the only perspective. There were others. And indeed, if you search Twitter now for Trayvon Martin, what you'll find is, I was shocked to find this, a huge number of conservative tweets that are very hostile to this young boy who got shot. He's become a symbol of an imagined injustice, in my view, an imagined injustice on the other side, right? And so viral campaigns, even at the moment that they're unfolding, seldom achieve hegemony, that they're one argument in the mix. And then finally, looking at the public debate subsequent to the viral campaign, right, that follows it temporarily, the ask causes other organizations, journalists who are covering the issue, to sharpen their arguments and expose their reasons and gather more information about the case at hand. That was certainly true for Trayvon Martin. That particular episode would not have achieved much illumination from a further investigation of the facts of the case were it not for the campaign, and similarly for these others as well. Now, just to qualify a little bit, I think that it's certainly not always the case that discussion on the internet or viral campaigns on the internet will always enhance the quality of deliberation. That's just not so. And a couple of dangers or challenges to be aware of in in this deliberative contribution of virality are two. One is cascades of misinformation that never get corrected for a whole set of reasons. And the second is that sometimes campaigns and information don't flow through the whole public sphere of the internet, but only through relatively homogeneous parts of it. And so you get these homogeneous echo chambers and insular parts of the social network that are repeating information that doesn't get challenged in the spirit of deliberation in other kinds of ways, right? Okay, so those three, the first three values, inclusion, political equality, and deliberation, look to the quality of democracy writ large out there. The fourth value, which I regard as very, very important also, looks inside participants. And this fourth value is the value of civic education, right? So, borrowing from Amy Gutman, citizens must have opportunities to learn virtue, knowledge, and skills necessary for political participation. And we regard viral engagement as helpful if it helps them do these things, right? Helpful for democracy if it helps them gain the virtues, knowledge, and skills necessary for political participation. Does it do that? There's a lot of skepticism that it doesn't, that internet participation doesn't yield civic benefits that Gutman would like, right? And many of us would like, maybe all of us would like, right? So for instance, Malcolm Gladwell, writing in the pages of the New Yorker, says that weak ties and low commitment means little learning on the political front, that is that the social networks that are engaged through viral engagement are weak tie networks that don't really ask that much of people, and so they don't get that much out of it. And his imaginary here is the civil rights movement. You know, compare signing a change.org petition to protesting in the Deep South in the era of civil rights in the United States. And obviously the latter requires a huge, much more commitment. And I agree, you know, if that's the comparison, then the civic education benefits of engaging in civil rights protests are much greater. Evgeny Morozov, my friend Evgeny Morozov, calls internet activism slacktivism, right? And he worries that there's a displacement effect, that online engagement may displace more meaningful forms of civic engagement, that by signing an online petition, in doing that, you do that instead of engaging in other political acts, going to a demonstration, voting for a candidate, contributing to an advocacy group or political campaign, right? The displacement thesis, so far as I know, is empirically open. I don't think that there's much evidence that I've seen anyway on either side of the displacement thesis. We don't know. So, two responses to the skeptics of viral engagement on the grounds that it won't contribute to civic education. One response is that if there is no displacement, which there may very well not be, I don't see any particular a priori reason to think that there would be much displacement, that viral engagement will make modest contributions to civic education, right? People who watch the Coming 2012 video will know a little bit more about human rights in Africa than they did before. People who signed the Trayvon Martin Change.org petition will have thought a little bit more about the criminal justice system and racial disparities in it than they did before, right? So that's one response. The second response is, and I think that there's a fair amount of evidence to support this, right? The second response is that viral engagement may be a kind of gateway drug to further political participation, both on the part of the participants, but more importantly on the part of the political entrepreneurs who are trying to mobilize the participants, right? And so one benefit of, to the organization, to organizations like Planned Parenthood, and even organizations like Change.org, is that through these viral campaigns, they build very large lists and databases of potential members and deeper participants. And so many of them, according to David Carter at least, view that first act of liking a message on Facebook or signing a petition as the very lowest rung on a ladder of civic engagement. And what advocacy organizations are doing all the time, those that are savvy like Move On or like Planned Parenthood, now they have lists of millions of people and will be trying to get portions of those people up higher, on higher and more demanding rungs of civic engagement. So think about the 2.2 million people in the Change.org petition, or the however many hundreds of thousands of people who supported the Planned Parenthood campaign as the wide end of a funnel. And then in the subsequent weeks and months, these advocacy organizations are going to that list and asking the people on that list to become more engaged members of their organizations, to contribute money, to go to meetings, to go to other kinds of activities, to support other campaigns. And so bumping up some portion of those people up onto higher rungs of civic engagement. And if that's the case, if the organizations actually use social media and the number of people who have engaged in the Slacktivist acts in that way, then a bunch of the Slacktivists will go on to become activists who wouldn't have otherwise done so. And that would mark an important gain for civic engagement. Okay, so just to speculate about a little bit about the future here. You know, I was talking a little bit before the remarks, before the talk, and somebody asked whether there were recent viral engagements in 2013, you know, after these 4 cases, whether I noticed any. And none really came to mind, and I don't know, and some I would be very interested in whether or not people have noticed viral engagements in 2013. And if not, why not? And so one possibility is that viral engagement of this kind will deepen and grow, and that the possibilities for democracy on these 4 dimensions will be increased in the ways that I described, right? That organizations will learn the power of virality and gain additional capacities to trigger viral campaigns and thereby engage millions of people in political issues who would not otherwise be engaged, right? That's one possible future. I don't know whether the real future will be that one, right? Another possibility is that viral engagements will be co-opted in different ways. In particular, that they will be co-opted one way is by organizations and interests who are very, very well resourced, that there are returns to investment in viral engagement. And what we're seeing, what we saw in 2011 and 2012, was just this first pre-professional stage, and as it gets more professional, it will not generate these benefits for democracy because it will be more manipulated as public relations and propaganda is manipulated, right? Another possibility of co-optation is that, and this is, I think, I haven't thought through all the positives and negatives, but another possibility is that large organizations will recognize the demands and the values that are being expressed through viral engagement and create channels to normalize those demands and incorporate that input, right? And so in thinking about 2013, one issue that seems like it would have been a natural for viral engagement is the debate around gun control in the United States in the wake of the shootings in Newtown, Connecticut, in which all of these kids were killed by this madman. And you think, well, you know, if Trayvon Martin triggered a viral campaign, this one should trigger a much, much larger one. You know, I haven't done the full internet investigation, but it didn't strike me as the same kind of viral campaign for the legislation, etc. One avenue that was available in 2013 that wasn't available in for these earlier viral campaigns, or as available, was a very normalized site. Now there's a site from the Obama administration, from the White House, called We the People. And this site enables anyone to register a petition for any subject that they want. And if the petition garners more than a certain threshold of votes, it's an increasing threshold. It used to be, I think, 25,000. Now it's 100,000. Then the White House will respond. And it's interesting that people inside the White House who are creating the site face a fair amount of pushback, I understand, from the communications types in the White House, because all kinds of stuff gets on there. So one of the petitions that's gotten some of the largest number of signatures is a petition for the state of Texas to secede from the United States. Another petition was for the Defense Department to build the Death Star, for those of you who remember Star Wars, right? However, relevant to the Newtown, Connecticut shootings, one of the petitions that's gotten more signatures than any other, and that the president did respond to, was a petition in the wake of the Newtown shootings to implement comprehensive gun control in the United States. And that petition, which I followed, got something like 130,000 signatures, and they took it off because the president responded to it and said, yes, that's on my legislative agenda. I will push for that. And he has. But the president pushing for that piece of legislation is different from the viral campaigns that unfolded here, such as the Trayvon Martin campaign, which got 2.2 million signatures, etc. And we don't, so one effect, I think one unintended effect of the response of the White House is that we'll never know how many signatures that petition would have gotten if it had been allowed to go on. There was no reason for it to go on given the structure of the White House system, because the president responded to it and said, yes, I'll do it. Right? So that's an example in which people in the administration are noticing both digital politics and the energies, the unpredictable, the unruly energies that have emerged and harnessed digital politics, and created a platform to incorporate some of those voices, which may, I don't know, which may take some of the energy out of the kinds of viral campaigns that I've talked about here. Now, another possibility is that these viral campaigns are very much about information and frameworks and messaging. It may be the case that the principal political uses of digital politics will not be about that kind of viral spread in the future, but about more precise targeting of potential supporters and mobilizing rather than convincing. And so here I'm thinking about the contrasting narratives between the Obama campaign of 2008 and the Obama campaign of 2012. And the narratives, in broad strokes, and the broad strokes are only approximately correct, right? There's a lot of slippage there. In broad strokes, the main use of digital technologies by the Obama campaign in 2008 was to support a kind of bottom-up grassroots mobilization by using data and messaging and online engagement and offline engagement to mobilize lots and lots of people in small groups through a field operation and through a whole set of digital platforms. The main narrative for the success of the Obama campaign in 2012 regarding technology and digital technologies is not that at all. It is the use of very large voter databases of hundreds of millions of people to target exactly which subgroups and sub-messages will be most responsive, and which subgroups and which alternative messages will be most responsive to some sort of cost-effective signal from the campaign to get them to vote for the candidate, right? And so a very interesting book on this, popular book on this is The Victory Lab by Sasha Eisenberg, right? And so they're in those kinds of big data discussions, right? Evidently, the Obama campaign there is not kind of trying to spark these viral engagements, but rather trying to figure out which messages and buttons to push. So when they sent emails to hundreds of millions of American voters, what they did was they tested all sorts of different subject lines, like please support the president, or what about healthcare? And it turns out the subject line that got the best response was simply, hey. And so that's the one they went with, right? But that is a very different use of digital technologies for political, to serve political gains, and with very different political consequences than the kind I've discussed there. Now, just in the very last remark, this is kind of not really saying anything other than to provide a very, very general structure that I don't know how it will work out in the future, but probably one way to think about which future is likely to happen with regard to technology and digital politics and organizations, is to think about three sets of factors: organizational goals, digital affordances, and institutional incentives, right? And so this is not none of this, as I hope is clear, is not a technologically deterministic view, right? But neither does it relegate digital technologies to some sort of superstructure or epiphenomenon. Digital technologies do create what the techies call affordances, possibilities for engagement and action that didn't exist before. Very low cost ability to express your support of a set of political values or campaigns by simply liking a Facebook page, etc., right? That is an affordance of digital technology that didn't exist before digital technology and social media campaigns, right? And so we have to understand what those affordances are. Simply big data is a digital affordance of analytics in a way that didn't exist just a very short time ago. And it's the way in which digital affordances are married to organizational goals that unfold in a structure of institutional incentives that determine what the future of digital politics will be. Those organizations will develop capacities and resources to exploit the affordances that best help them achieve their goals in the particular institutional structure that exists, right? And one reason why we saw these viral campaigns in 2012, I think, is because the organizations had developed the capacities to harness the technologies, and out there in society, the proliferation of social media and the use of social media had matured to a level in which these digital campaigns became affordable, or became possible to spread in this viral way. The future may hold a very different set of institutional incentives that advantages a very different set of organizations to very different political consequences. Thank you very much.